Buy-to-let is dead. With increasing regulations for landlords, more red tape, councils handing out unprecedented fines left, right and centre, and the government seemingly on a mission to stop investors buying property. And if they do, taking every penny they have, you could be forgiven in believing that property investing is on its way out. My name is Dwayne Squires, and in the last 2 years, I've helped clients and myself buy more than 120 buy-to-let properties. And I also currently own and previously owned agencies that have managed hundreds of units. So in this video, I'm going to share the 6 lessons I've learned that have helped us maximize the rental income we get and stay ahead of the curve. But firstly, let's cast our minds back to 2022. This was the year when the UK experienced skyrocket inflation levels, and to counter it, the Bank of England increased the base rate from a record low of 0.1% to record highs. And inevitably, the mortgage market reacted with jacking up the lending rates. There were tens of thousands of landlords who were on unfixed variable interest rates who were badly hit. You see, they had kept their mortgage unfixed, taking advantage of record low level mortgage rates, but were now experiencing mortgage payments in excess of the actual rental income. In effect, they were losing money on their property. So inevitably, over the last 2 to 3 years, there's been a rise in tone that traditional buy-to-let properties is dead. And so brings forth the new superheroes that have seen their popularity rise as a result. One of which is setting up a property and renting it room by room to, for example, professionals or contractors, also called houses of multiple occupancy. And the second hero is renting property on a short-term basis, e.g. nightly, weekly, using platforms such as Airbnb or Booking.com, also known as serviced accommodation or short-term rentals. But every superhero has its weakness. For HMOs, that's the significant churn on tenants, higher vacancy rates, and higher repairs, and also higher bills and utility costs. Although some things like utility costs can be placed on tenants, there's a lot more juggling to do. And for service accommodation, there's the risk of house parties, enormous cleaning bills, and your business partner, i.e. Airbnb and Booking.com, taking bigger and bigger splits of the revenue. Oh, and the government have also announced their plan to crack down on service accommodations, putting planning restrictions in place and seeking to take away the associated tax deductible benefits. So no, in this video, my 6 lessons to boost rental income don't rely on having to become a HMO or serviced accommodation workhorse. Instead, I'll focus on the tips that will boost rental income of traditional single family buy-to-let properties. So tip number 1. So over the years, interior designs have really shifted. In the 1800s, it was about the Victorian period design. And in the 1950s and 60s, the American diner style, groovy pop-up art and hippie style was really popular too. And then moving on to more modern times, the 90s to the early noughties, it was all about having hues and browns and magnolia colors. And more recently, there's been a move to more white walls and grey carpets. Yes, that's better than magnolia and browns, but now for every 10 properties, 5 or 7 of them come to market having the same exact style. Times change and so do tenant preferences. So from our experience, we're seeing the introduction of pops of color driving higher demand and obviously higher rental prices. For example, painting color feature walls, it could be pops of green, pops of blue. You'll see pictures of examples that we've done, or splashing out a bit more and fitting colored kitchen units. I'm talking light greens, olives, gray, even blues as well. So tip number 1 is look to introduce feature colors in the property. During COVID and lockdown, the feeling of isolation was on the rise. And actually, since COVID, 3.2 million households in the UK have acquired a pet. And whilst a pet can be great for mental health, it's often one of the big turnoffs amongst landlords when renting their property. No pets allowed. But I found that in recent properties, about 20% of the inquiries are actually coming from pet owners, and they're prepared to pay a bit more for the rent. So not only do we get a higher rent that compensates if furniture or items are broken, but also the tenants stay long term because there's not a lot of options for them to go to regarding more rental accommodation. So tip number 2 is, within reason, actually look to promote your property for pet owners. Number 3, so for one of our properties, we recently got an unusual application. It's a 2-bed property and the application was from 2 males working at the same workplace. Not very unusual, you say? However, they were emigrating from abroad and also intended to have their loved ones join them very soon. And as a result, they actually agreed to pay 20% more in rent. So another way to boost your rent without having to do too much is to rent to couples. However, be aware that there are different definitions of HMOs. So just check your local HMO rules and see if there's restrictions. But that tip could really boost your rental income by 20–30% or more. Another effect from COVID is that families want more space. Yes, obvious, I know, but by space, I mean functional space. An article I read not so long ago had a certain space lead to a 5% extra value in the property. And for one of the properties we just secured for one of our clients, that space is expected to increase the value by a minimum of £5,000 and also increase the rent by 10% or more. What is it? A utility room. Space permitting, these can be fitted for less than a few £1,000s, but give a double benefit in terms of price and rent growth. So tip number 4 is look to introduce a functional utility room. Tip number 5, when was the last time you stayed in a hotel, walked in, found the room in a mess, towels everywhere, skid marks in you know where, and just accepted it? Stayed in the room and said, this will do. How about almost never? Why would we think the same when it comes to a tenant who's looking to settle long-term with a family? So a key lesson I've learned is if we're investing in a property that doesn't necessarily need redecorating, or maybe the previous tenant moved out and I'm looking to backfill, I do 2 things. Number 1 is wait until the tenant moves out before marketing it. Number 2, do a thorough deep clean, especially carpets and windows. The extra space from the rooms being empty really presents the property in its best light, and the smell of a deeply cleaned house gives comfort and more appeal. And it's these subtleties that are unnoticed that really help maximize the rent by separating the property from other properties that have just flung it onto the market and not really taking the extra care and detail. It's effectively telling the tenant that you don't care about me, this is just a halfway home before I move on. But by just taking that extra care, it shows to them that actually I want to settle here long-term with my family. So tip number 5 is market the property empty and with a really good deep clean. Let me ask you this, I know it's a bit personal, but what's your hourly rate? Is it £20, maybe £25, maybe £50 or more? Whatever it is, consider this. The most successful and least stressed property investors I've experienced do the following very well. They understand their actual cost rate and then outsource everything that can be done at a lower cost rate. That way they buy back their time. So if you're a landlord and you find yourself spending 4, 5, 6 hours managing a property and your hourly rate is £20, that means the property is costing you actually 80, 100, 120 pounds. Compare that to what a quality property manager will charge. Maybe they charge 10% and on your property it's renting for £750. That means they're charging you effectively £75 per month. And moreover, the best property managers want to get more than £75, and the best way to do that is by giving value to increase the rent. So if the property now gets, let's say, £850, yes, you have to pay £85, but i.e. £10 or more, but you get £90 more rental income, plus you buy back your time, your energy to spend that on your lifestyle, your career, your family, and so on. And to really emphasize this point, if you're investing in a property outside your local area, a really good property manager is worth their weight in gold. They're gonna be saving you so much and allowing you to really buy back your time. One of the key things that I've really experienced is that self-managing landlords tend to not do a really good job of keeping up with market rents. They sometimes keep the rent unchanged for years. And so losing out on thousands of pounds in extra rental profits. Plus, when they come to sell, because of the lower rent and lower yield, they're actually having to take a lower price to sell it. So tip number 6, work with the right professionals to maximize your rental income and grow your portfolio. So implementing these tips and hacks will maximize the rental income for your buy-to-let property. But there's a secret strategy that can boost the rent you get by nearly 50%, and it's not what you expect. So click this video to watch and find out.